before we hit record, you and I were talking about like the etymology of swear words, and we were talking about, we specifically mentioned how a lot of swear words don't start out as bad, but they end up used in negative ways that brings with it this swear word connotation. Right.
They usually come from a language that is being used as a vernacular and used as like a vulgar language by the ruling class who uses some other language.
Right. Or another situation would be like the word damn, right? Because that was a very religious context. People will be damned to hell, and then that eventually said, you're going to be damned to hell. And then you have the word hell itself.
Or ass, which was referring to a donkey.
Right. And that conversation reminded me. So I was listening to the book, The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis, which is the 6th book chronologically in the series of 7.
Wait, when you say chronologically, do you mean 6th book that C.S. Lewis wrote in the Chronicles of Narnia?
No, I mean like
the 6th one in his timeline.
In the timeline of Narnia, it is book 6.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm sitting there listening. It's great narration. And I came to this line. I see, said Jill. We must pretend to be awfully excited about it and keep on asking questions. They think we're absolute infants anyway, which will make it easier. Gay, said Puddleglum with a deep sigh. That's what we've got to be. Gay. As if we didn't have a care in the world. Frolicsome. You two youngsters haven't always got very high spirits, I've noticed. You must watch me and do as I do. I'll be gay, like this.
So that's actually really funny.
Because I laughed in my car.
Well, not just because of like the 12-year-old that I very much am still, internally. But so I've been prepping to work with my church who is volunteering at the Eugene Pride event. Which if you're in the Eugene area on August 10th, come down to Alton Baker Park. And specifically the area that I am probably going to be engaging in is their de-escalation team, which is the team that's like counter-protesting the far-right protesters that don't want the event to happen.
Sure.
And from what I've learned from, talking with like the organizers of this event is that's essentially their tactic is just act gay, but more like in that sense of gay. No. Like you want to just fight hatred with just showing them that, hey, we're having fun.
Yeah. And that's the best way to fight something like that.
Yeah. And that's actually really funny that's like the way that C.S. Lewis, who a lot of, I know C.S. Lewis was, Christian.
Yeah.
And had a lot of Christian
Catholic.
themes.
He was Catholic specifically, I think. Wait, let me double check that.
Well, but either way, he was, his works were heavily allegoric of, Christian.
Anglican. But yes, sorry.
Yeah, Christian. I mean, I'm not going to say they're the same thing.
It's a Protestant Christian religion, but yeah.
In practice, though, Anglicans and Catholics,
there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. It goes on. It gets better. Like it stops there, and then there's like more conversation, and then he convinces them, and. All right, gay's the word, said Scrub. Now, if we could only get someone to open this door, while we're fooling about and being gay, we've got to find out all we can about this castle.
Is that door a closet?
Wouldn't it be better if it was? That would be hilarious.
So much. I mean, the first book that he wrote is essentially about going into a closet. Could it be that The Silver Chair is about coming out of the closet?
Well, I got a few things here. So first of all, I mean, back to the original point, we were talking about how words change over time, right? This word gay, in this sense, is obviously talking about frolicking around, smiling, being happy. And that's
jovial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it has since changed. And I think that word really began to change in the 1960s and 70s.
That's about the time period that I was actually thinking about this just for whatever reason the other day
Yeah,
of when it did change. Yeah, that tracks
yeah.
based on my
the
knowledge.
the other thing is, I mean, so C.S. Lewis baptized into the Church of Ireland. I just double checked it. So he baptized into the Church of Ireland as a kid, falls away as an atheist for a good chunk of his life until conversations with friends, including J.R.R. Tolkien, convince him
Yes,
to take another approach at Christianity, and he becomes Anglican.
which is
However, he never
really
married and he never
okay.
had kids. He did have,
Neither did
like,
Jesus.
true. And I'm not saying that that means he was gay. I do know that he had some relationships with women that just never turned into marriages, and I think they were more like close female friendships.
Sure.
He strikes me, from what I've read about him, he strikes me as more of just like this reclusive academic who just didn't really care about
Right.
relationships in
Maybe
general.
more of like maybe like a confirmed bachelor, but not in the like innuendo sense. Not innuendo, but like the term confirmed bachelor.
Oh, wait, hold on. I was wrong. He was married.
Okay.
He was married to a woman named Joy Davidman for 4 years. They married in 1956. She died at 1960, and he raised her two sons, his stepsons, as his own.
Okay.
So he didn't have any biological children, um, and he did die 3 years after she did.
Okay, so he was more or less married for the majority of his life. Not
No,
that
he was
that
married for
really makes
he
any
was married
difference,
for
but
4 years. So he got married in 1956. She died in 1960. He died in 63 at the age of 64 years old.
okay.
So I used to know all of this because I remember looking all this up and learning a whole bunch about him and like for school projects and stuff. But
Yeah.
anyway,
But I think it's interesting,
yeah,
just real quick before we move on to the actual episode, I think it's interesting that J.R.R. Tolkien like was part of his inspiration for coming back to the church because
yeah,
J.R.R. Tolkien famously said, don't read anything don't read anything religious into my stories. They're not religious stories.
right,
There are parallels because that's how, the mythic image, as Joseph Campbell might describe it.
sure,
There's common motifs, but J.R.R. Tolkien specifically said this is not an allegory in a
sure.
way that C.S. Lewis very much said this is an allegory.
Right. I mean, Jesus even makes an appearance at the end of the last battle, book
That's
7.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
Yeah, Aslan turns into Jesus, and because Aslan's like, well, you know
Aslan
me in your
is, I
world.
mean, yeah, the Lion and the Lamb, like it was pretty thinly veiled.
Well, not only that, but in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, you have him killed, and then he resurrects a little bit later.
for like 3 days. Yeah.
I don't think it's quite that long. I think it's just one night, but
Is it not?
I don't think so.
I know that he does come back in, I think, Prince Caspian.
He's in every
briefly.
book. Aslan is the only character to appear in every single book.
Is he? Oh yeah, that's right, because that's not the Pevensies
Yeah.
In The Horse and His Boy. I only got to The Horse and His Boy, or was The Horse and His Boy before Dawn Treader?
Yeah, so chronological order is
Yeah.
The Magician's Nephew, because that shows the creation of Narnia.
Right, that's the Pevensies' uncle when he was a kid, and
Correct.
also how the White Queen got into Narnia.
Let me just double check this because I had an idea earlier, and then I'm realizing now that I was saying it wrong because part of The Horse and His Boy happens after the events of something else.
Okay,
so
I know it's definitely Magician's Nephew is the first chronologically.
All right, so
because through the
Yeah.
events of that story is how all of these magical worlds get opened up to one another.
Exactly. So I had two switched. So it's when I was talking to you about this before we recorded. So it's Magician's Nephew, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Silver Chair, Last Battle.
Oh, okay, so I was right initially.
Yes. However, they were not published in that order. They were published Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, Dawn Treader, Silver Chair, Horse and His Boy, Magician's Nephew, Last Battle.
Oh wow, Magician's Nephew was that late?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so okay, so I guess there's only 2 books in the series that I haven't read.
So you should listen to them on Audible. I got a collection. You can buy them individually, but you can also buy one where it's all of them together
That's
by the
all of
same.
them.
Yeah, and it's by the same narrators, and they're not just anybody narrators. Let me pull up just so I can get the big ones correct. But
I'm gonna
the
guess
one,
Stephen Fry.
no, actually.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
However, Patrick Stewart reads The Last Battle.
No way.
Yeah,
Okay.
way.
Definitely.
Kenneth
Downloading that
Branagh
one.
also reads one.
That's a good. Which one?
I believe he reads The Magician's Nephew.
Okay. That's a great bookend.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic bookend.
And then
Gilderoy
Michael York.
Lockhart and then and Jean-Luc Picard.
Right. And
for
then you
first
also
and
have
last book.
And then you've got Michael York reads
I
one of
don't
them
know
too.
who that is.
You would know his face when you see him.
Okay.
He's in Austin Powers. He's like the guy who tells Austin Powers what his new mission is. He's got like the really wide
Basil?
smile. Yeah, he's Basil. That's his name.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
And then
He's got a great voice.
He really
I didn't
does.
know. I think the only thing I've ever seen him in is probably Austin Powers.
But no, they're really well read. Now, speaking of stories, because we're talking about stories right now, you tried to tell me a story before we started, and I said no.
About
we
my
need
finger?
to have this. So I'm going to give you the questions you told me to ask you. Hey, Andrew, how was your weekend?
It was great. I now I got to think about what I was making. Oh, I made ribs. And actually it wasn't even. I had made the ribs. I made some like elote corn to go along with it, and a
Nice.
broccoli salad. And anyone who knows anything about me knows that I love to cook. And as any good cook does, I keep my knives very sharp. Got through making the whole meal just fine. Went to go wash my knife, which I only wash by hand, and sliced all the way through my index finger down to the bone, and potentially severed a nerve.
No.
I can feel a little bit on the tip of it, but not a whole lot. I already have some nerve damage from when I was a baker, and I would take sheet pans out of the oven. To this day, I can take a sheet pan out of the oven without gloves or anything.
Wow.
And
okay.
It's not a problem. No, I mean, I can't continue to hold on to it, but I can move it from the oven to the counter next to me, and be fine.
And it doesn't even like cause burning or blistering on your hands?
No.
Because I barely touch the sheet pan, and I feel like I get the red mark, and if I have it there for more than like half a second, I get a blister.
Well, but I'm also a guitar player, so I have pretty heavy calluses built up, and just other things. Gardening builds up my calluses, so I've got some like protection there.
Okay.
But yeah, I can. I will begin to get burnt and like develop blisters before I will feel like heat on my hands, which is a problem.
Oh my gosh.
But no, my knife is just it's a Serbian chef's knife, which is kind of like a mix between a regular chef's knife and a cleaver.
Oh, I've seen those.
Yeah,
okay.
they're
I'm looking
all
at it
over
right now.
TikTok and
yeah.
stuff like that. That's actually, I think I bought mine after seeing it on Instagram. But it's a fantastic knife. It's got enough heft to it that like you could use it as a cleaver, but it's not so heavy that you don't still have a little bit of finesse. It's high carbon steel, so it keeps a really nice edge. But it does take you have to like know what you're doing when you're sharpening it. to be
So
able to hone it to get that razor blade edge. And
yeah.
unfortunately, I do know how to do that. So just slice clean through my finger.
So I will say what is attractive to me about these knives, now that I know what you're talking about what you're talking about is when I
Yeah,
see this, just the sheer size of it seems
right.
to me like it would make it safer to do like the fast chops where you have to like push the knife
Yeah,
against your fingers anyway. And I've always
yeah.
been worried about going too far up and just slicing right into my fingers. And since this is like,
Well,
I mean, it looks
if
like
you're
that's a
doing
5-inch tall blade. You've got way more leeway.
Yeah, I would say it's about 5 inches, like from blade to the back of it. If you're doing the curling your fingers underneath thing correctly, there's never any issue with any knife, but that's actually pretty hard to do. And
Yeah,
so even people with you know more than average knife skills will still from time to time not tuck their thumb in or not tuck
right.
their knuckles in far enough. This knife definitely helps with it, but more than anything, it's comfortable. It's I know a lot of people really like it because you can also use it to like scrape up your ingredients. I don't do that. I have a dedicated scraper that's not a knife because you will ruin the edge on your knife if you use it as a scraper. But I know a lot of people like it for that reason.
As someone who does that, um, I
I mean, I
would.
do it occasionally too, but I chastise myself every time.
I mean, I don't like. I was gonna say I don't do it with huge amounts of food, but I guess I actually do. Like, if I'm doing like garlic and it's just a quick scoop,
And
put in,
yeah,
like I'm not gonna go get
I think we
another
all do.
utensil.
Well, that's the thing is I just have a dough scraper right next to me all the time, and I that kind of goes back to just my days as a baker.
Sure.
Um, it's a if I have my knife out, I usually also have my dough scraper out, and I use my dough scraper because it's for scraping, and a knife is for cutting.
So what I'm hearing out of this conversation is that you are, because of how much you work with and chop up meat, you might consider yourself somewhat of a amateur butcher, and you used to be a
Ooh,
baker, and so now all you need to be is a candlestick maker.
okay. Butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker.
I know you're not
What's the
actually
rest
an
of it?
amateur butcher. I don't actually know. My wife says this every once in a while, or at least she used to. Let me see.
I think my butchering skill. Sorry, I think my ability to like butcher larger cuts of meat is probably my least honed skill.
Yeah, same. Rub a dub dub, 3 men in a tub, and who do you think they be? The butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, and all of them out to sea.
I mean, maybe.
Speaking of body parts being removed, and
Yeah,
yeah, Trump,
ears.
right, almost got assassinated. So if, oh
He
man,
got a piercing.
if you made it this long into the episode and you're wondering, hey, when are they going to talk about politics? When are they going to give up on this Narnia and knife bull crap? Now. Now is the time. Um,
You don't know that wasn't hidden language. We could have just that all could have been code for where to find the map on the back of the
the
not
Declaration
the
of Independence.
Declaration. No, that one's been done. Nicolas Cage found that.
Okay.
Let's say
The
on the
Magna
back
Carta.
of that's too grandiose. I'll think of it.
Yeah, just shout it out. Interrupt, whatever. Whether it's you talking, me talking, when it occurs to you, just shout it out. Watch it be like an
Yeah.
hour and a half from now, and you're like, your mom's
Hammurabi's
backside.
code.
Right. Hammurabi's. That's better than what I said. Your mom's backside.
That's even more grandiose.
Right. The Rosetta Stone. Anyway, yeah, we want to talk. Oh, man, so much happened this last week.
A lot has happened. A
And
lot
it's
has happened.
still happening at the time of recording this on Tuesday evening, July 23rd.
Yes.
Oh, man. So we're going to talk about the Trump assassination. We're going to talk about
Attempt.
assassination attempt. You're right. And
Jesus.
and
Hold on.
Biden
Someone's at the
dropping
door.
out.
They say they're Secret Service.
Oh, man. You must not have a sloped roof.
No, I mean, it would also require the Secret Service to actually do their job.
Oh, my
So
gosh.
I doubt they're going to be showing up here.
I will say, I mean, it's very tragic that an innocent person was killed, and it's terrible that
Yes.
someone decided to do this. I know a lot of people are celebrating the fact that someone tried to shoot Trump. A lot of people are disappointed that it was unsuccessful. I don't care who it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care who it is. This kind of an event is not something to be proud of.
Yeah. If I can just speak to my fellow liberals, no, this is not something to be celebrated. This is, we were so close to something that would have been so dangerous for the country, and something that would have cost many more lives. Political violence is not, well, I won't say that, there's never a time for political violence. This certainly is not it.
I mean, our country is built on the idea of political violence, right? The whole Revolutionary War is
Every
one big
is.
Instance of political violence. You're
I
right
don't know
to some
any
extent.
country that doesn't. That's part of why they're allowed to be a country. Is that
right? Yeah, because you've either gained independence from or gained control over someone else.
Right. Yeah.
So I agree with that, but I do think that, especially when it comes to the political violence that we're seeing. So, I mean, as a history teacher, as someone who has studied primarily modern dictatorships, right? Especially under communist regimes, but just this whole idea of how authoritarianism rises, it's usually when you see intense political stratification followed by some major political violence, right? And sometimes that is an assassination or an assassination attempt. Sometimes that is a coup, an uprising. Like the Bolshevik Revolution was an uprising. Right. We get a lot of South American authoritarians that are built on assassination attempts or military coups. A lot of African regimes are built on assassinations, attempts, and military coups. So we see.
I mean, World War I, the murdering of Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Exactly, right, and so, I mean, I'm really happy that the majority of Democrats, to my knowledge, are not celebrating this. Right, I do want to be clear.
I think what it is, I think it's more widespread, because I'm not going to say that if Trump got a very severe flu, that I wouldn't at least be relieved. I personally don't wish harm on anyone.
Sure.
But an assassination is a horse of a different color entirely.
Right. It brings with it severely different consequences. I mean, you're absolutely right. It would be a completely different story if maybe Trump came out with a cancer diagnosis and passed away in a little bit,
which I wouldn't be celebrating. But there's a Mark Twain quote, I think, which I think this one is actually attributed to him.
I will not one live of type it into Google while you say it, so we can see.
It's something like, or maybe not even be Mark Twain. It might be. I think it's someone more recent. It's something like, I've never wished for the death of anyone, but I've not been disappointed by the death of some.
Clarence Darrow, but it is attributed to Mark Twain.
Okay, yeah. It's something like that. Like, I'm not actively rooting for somebody to die, but so there are certain people whose death I would feel less bad about.
Yeah, so the quote specifically is, "I've never wished a man dead, but I have read some obituaries with great pleasure."
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm thinking of. That's one of my dad's favorite quotes, and I'll give him credit for telling me that. He has
Yeah.
said that I think he first said that to me when Scalia passed away.
Right. And again, there is a difference between being like, "Oh, thank heavens that this person's not in power anymore," and "we need to kill this person to get them out of power." Right? There, it's
Right.
two very
Actively taking
different.
steps to bring about that, very different. And also uh potentially uh um like existentially dangerous.
Right. And I mean, let's look at on a similar note, right? This whole idea that Biden recently dropped out, which we're going to talk more at
Right.
length about later. Future Camron here. Funny story. We did not actually get around to talking about Biden dropping out of the race in this episode. As you'll find out, we get pretty heated in this one. Andrew even apologizes to me about it. What a good friend. To really do justice to the topic of Biden dropping out, we're going to record another episode where we can give it the time that topic and you, the listener, deserve. Anyway, back to the podcast. But this basically stemmed after this came after he got a nasty case of COVID. And
Right.
I think the writing was on the wall anyway that he was going to drop out, but that nasty case of COVID maybe was the last, not to be
kicker.
too crass here, the last nail in the coffin, the straw that broke the camel's back. And
well, so you and I talked before this weekend,
Sure.
and you had sent me something about Biden dropping out, and I was like, no way, there's no way.
And then the next day,
because that is the narrative that like Biden was all in.
Yeah.
And then he got COVID, and I think thankfully he did reevaluate things.
Well, let's be clear. You and I had that conversation after he had already had COVID and had temporarily suspended campaigning.
I didn't know about the COVID.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, so I was basing that on I don't know if you're familiar with it's a YouTuber and TikToker. Her name is Under the Desk News on her social media. And she is a journalist. Yeah, so she's a journalist who works on Capitol Hill. And she gets her name because she worked in Congress for Congress people, and she would often film her TikToks under her desk. She's
So she
openly
did actually work with Congress. It's not.
Yes.
I worked around Congress.
No. She filmed a lot of her videos, to my knowledge. I may be misremembering, but to my knowledge, a lot of her videos are even filmed in the Capitol building under her desk in her office.
Right.
And she is very, very open about her liberal bias, which, I mean, again, I don't necessarily mind bias. I mind people trying to hide and gaslight about their bias, and so I really appreciate that she's open about
people
that.
not being open about their bias and or not examining it.
Right, so like Fox News trying to say we're exactly facts and that's it. It's like, are you?
Yeah, fair. What's their slogan? Free and fair, or fair,
something like I don't know.
That.
I don't care.
Which is just they need to change that.
Right, and CNN's recent rebranding of trying to not be a biased network and trying to be more center down the line.
That's more their new owner, who is doing a bad job of that.
Right. And so what I'm saying is those are two examples of clearly biased media that are trying to hide it. But
fair and balanced. Fair and balanced.
That's what it is. Anyway, so this under the desk.
Sorry, that's the document that I was supposed to shout at. Never mind.
So anyway, I was basing what I was talking to you about, how the rumors that Biden was going to drop out as early as Sunday night or Saturday night, whenever we had that conversation.
Oh, I think there have been rumors since the debate.
The rumors were that he was going to drop out that very night that we were talking about it. And I was basing it on a video by this lady on social media, Under the Desk News, who laid out all the different reasons that it was possible and laid out all the different reasons why it could just be a conspiracy. And she said, like, these aren't sources that are talking to me. These are sources that are reporting to other news agencies that I have access to as a journalist, kind of a thing.
Right.
And
which I think is why
yeah.
I was, would incredulous be the right word? Disbelieving.
Yeah, disbelieving I think would be better.
Okay. Because
Hesitant.
because here's my issue, and I'm usually not the one on this podcast who is criticizing the media.
Right, it is always me, almost always me.
Not always, but
almost,
more often. I think
more often
you are you're more distrustful than I am.
Sure.
I honestly, I think. Well, okay. Do we want to? Let's just jump into the Biden dropping out.
No. Hold on. Let's come back to that, because I do want to talk a little bit more about like what happened with the Trump assassination attempt and the implications of it. Because as we mentioned earlier, before we recorded, I think that has a lot of implications into Biden's dropping out. And I think it changed for me.
Then remind me of this later when we get to the Biden thing, about how I feel the media played a part in it.
I will write that down.
I'll get back to that point.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, because I personally think that the Democrats maybe had a small chance before that happened.
Oh, I think it's way better now. Now that I've had time to digest it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. We'll have to talk about that in a second. So, first of all, there's so much wrong with this assassination attempt, right? Not only, I mean, I don't buy into conspiracy theories. I do my best not to. There is one thing here that I don't buy, and it's that the Secret Service looked everywhere and said, yeah, we're only going to get on this one roof. We're not going to get on that one. And I know
they were just on one roof.
They were. So there's only 2 buildings in the complex, and they were on the one. They were not on the other. And they say it's because, like, the official statement is, they said, well, it was a sloped roof that was deemed unsafe for them to be on. But the roof that they were on has been shown to be more sloped than the one that they said not to go on. And they secured that building from the inside. On top of that, this dude walks up to the building with a ladder and a gun, and audience members are saying, hey, look at that guy over there.
There's a guy up there.
Yeah. And the police officers say, oh my gosh, let me go tell the Secret Service. And they go tell the Secret Service, and they're like, I don't know what to do. And not only that, but after the gunshots go off, you see some of the Secret Service members struggling to get their guns out of their holsters. You see them hiding behind President Trump instead of covering him.
By the time that anyone knew what was going on, the shooter was dead.
Sure.
There's a series of shots, and you have okay, here's a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
One is that there are zones of influence, basically when the Secret Service set up that parameter, and they had the area of immediate danger that the Secret Service was in charge of, and then they had the outside zone, which the local police was in charge of. Now, the zone that the shooter was in the police zone. Okay. The other thing is that the Secret Service did a terrible job. They did not do their job well. And one of the few things that I've ever agreed with Republican lawmakers on is that the head of the Secret Service should resign, because she did a bad job. She resigned
today.
She did? Okay.
She did.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that is totally appropriate. I would imagine that was probably at the request of Biden, or at least Biden's team.
I know that it happened after she was being questioned. It could be. It very well could be.
Yeah, this is also not her or the Secret Service's first lapse,
right?
And they did a bad job.
And to
but
add insult to injury, the Trump campaign had been saying, hey, we've seen increased security problems. We need more
no, not
Secret
the Trump
Service.
campaign. I think the CIA said that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was the Iran thing.
Let
Is
me
that what
just
you're talking
Google.
about?
Let me double check.
Oh, basically there was an anonymous threat made about an assassination attempt on Trump coming or supposedly from Iran. So that whole like week beforehand, there was supposed to be increased Secret Service security on both Biden and Trump. And I would
Interesting.
imagine all of the other presidents who still enjoy the benefits of a Secret Service detail, as
Yeah.
I think all former presidents do.
Yeah.
Um, and they apparently just didn't like do anything. So while this was not a this shooter was a lone gunman, it wasn't part of any conspiracy, just a troubled kid who should not have had access to guns, who was given an unfortunate opportunity to make a bad situation even worse. There should have been increased security at that rally, and there
So,
wasn't. And the Secret Service is absolutely to blame for that.
so according to the Washington Post, it says top officials at the U.S. Secret Service repeatedly denied requests for additional resources and personnel sought by Donald Trump's security detail in the
Yeah.
2 years leading up to his attempted assassination.
Well, but even just within the last week,
Mhm.
they had requested things for something that was credible enough that I believe Biden did ask himself for increased security detail on Trump.
Now, something else that you touched on, that you said that I want to touch on, and I fully agree. This is a person who should not have had a gun or access to a gun. I will be honest and say that as much as I am all for people owning guns, and I think we should have more and more people armed than not, I also am kind of evolving, and I'm not sure how I think about this right now at the moment. So, and I
Okay.
will readily, openly admit to not being an expert on gun control, and not even knowing what my personal feelings are on it at the moment. And this has been something I've been dealing with for the last 6 months. However,
Okay.
I will say, you said this was a troubled young person who shouldn't have had access to a gun, and I will say that I agree with
Yes.
that. However, this is a situation where the way I understand the types of policies that people are calling for in gun control would not have been stopped by those policies, because this person was not red flagged or even on the FBI's radar for
Nope.
mental health or anything. He
Nope.
didn't have any signs.
His parents were behavioral health therapists.
And everyone who was around him said they had no indication that he was struggling in any sort of way with any kind of mental health
Yep.
or anything. And the gun wasn't even his, it belonged to his father. And
Legally
so,
purchased by his father, I think about 10 weeks before.
right. And so this is one of those situations where, when you look at the kind of gun control laws that a lot of people are calling for, where red flag laws, waiting periods, making sure that people legally buy things, increased security measures by the FBI to identify problematic people who maybe should not have guns, things like that. None of that would have stopped this situation.
Right. And I look at that as even more evidence that we need to have those basic common sense things in place.
See, but I think the answer here in this particular situation, because I'm not going to use this one isolated incident to contradict all of these policies that people are calling for. I don't think.
Can I maybe just name a couple policies that would be common sense that wouldn't infringe on anyone's rights that could have stopped this?
Yeah, give me half a second though, because what I'm saying is
Okay.
I don't think that those laws would have stopped this from happening, but I also don't want to use one isolated incident to go against a plethora of policies that I honestly don't know a lot about. I do think what would
But there
have
are a
stopped
lot
this,
of other incidences that are just like this that aren't as high profile that
right, and but
would
what I'm
also
saying is
apply.
the solution in this particular instance would have been the Secret Service doing their job.
Well, in order to respond effectively and prevent a shooter, a shooter at this event. But we can also potentially stop the possibility of a shooter at all. And one of the ways that could have been done to stop this one in particular is having to register every firearm
Mm-hmm.
and ensure that the people who purchase those firearms, I mean, I'm going to the argument about an AR-15 versus any other firearm, that's a different argument, which also I think plays a part in this, but without talking about that whole other can of worms, a national registry of firearm owners who have proven that they have been trained in firearm safety, uh, and a requirement to have um, ammunition kept separate, a trigger lock on each gun when not in use, and something like they have in Switzerland. Like you can't take your guns. You can own firearms in Switzerland, but you
I
can't
think
take them
most of
home.
Switzerland requires you to own a gun.
Yes, you cannot take it home. It's kept at a gun club or some other, third space, and the ammunition is kept separate. You're not allowed to, unless you're on the firing range. You're not allowed to own or to have, ammunition and the firearm in the same place. I don't think that kind of law would ever, take take hold here, but requiring every gun owner to have a gun lock on their gun when not in use, um, I think is a great idea. It in no way infringes on anyone's rights. You can get your gun at any time, but the people who shouldn't have your gun aren't going to get your gun, or are much less
Right.
likely.
I
Um,
I will say I'm in favor of those. I mean, that sounds logical to me because I'm looking at that as
right.
saying, well, I have to register my car. I have to provide a bill of sale to show that I'm giving ownership of this car to somebody else. And a
Yeah, you
car
have to have a
is
license to be able to operate it.
right, and a car is arguably much less dangerous than a gun, or arguably
Yeah.
much more dangerous. You can
Yeah, I
argue that
mean,
both ways.
yeah, there are ways you could argue it both ways.
I would say I don't know about some of those points just because like if you're going to require I don't see a
Well, wait,
problem with
but
the
before you push back,
Mhm.
my last point is that the fact that both of his parents are behavioral health professionals um, goes speaks to something that I've been saying for a while. In that, a lot of people who are gun enthusiasts or aren't quite ready to jump on the gun law reform bandwagon say it's a mental health issue, which it's not a mental health issue, but fundamentally it is a gun issue, and we cannot fix the problem with guns by fixing mental health. And right now we're doing neither, but I think it's much easier to do something about the gun problem than it is about the mental health problem.
Sure.
And I think about 75%, 70 to 75%, if I have my numbers correct, of mass shooters would not have been found to raise red flag laws. So we can't fix the gun issue by fixing the mental health crisis that we have. We have to address both of them as singular issues. And that's my biggest problem, is that guns are just too easy to uh, gain possession of by the wrong people. And we don't have a way to even discern who the right and wrong people are.
My only counter to that particular point is if someone is really dedicated to this idea of going out and shooting someone, they're going to find a way to get a gun no matter what.
Absolutely. They would, no matter what laws there are. That's why you
Um
have shootings in countries where there aren't guns, like the
right.
UK. I think last year they had a shooting.
Well, the UK does allow guns like especially out in the countryside, but that's
Yes,
you're dealing with
very, very
yeah.
limited, and not the types of guns that are not handguns, not other, not high capacity assault
Yeah, it's like
weapons.
shotguns and rifles.
It's like shotguns with limited capacity.
Now, what I will say is I like I like a lot of what you were talking about. I like the idea of having gun owners register what they have. I think that's a fine idea, and I think it makes law enforcement for crimes much easier to look at.
And
Um,
does not in any way violate Second Amendment. You have every right to have a gun. You
right.
don't have a right to own it unregistered.
My two problems came with the storing gun and ammunition in two separate places, and that's more for
I don't think that
logistical.
would. Yeah, I don't
I
think that would ever happen here.
Well, it I'll get to that in a second, but also the keeping them at a gun club. So with the storing them in two different places, I don't think that's a problem. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's smart, especially if you have kids in the house or if you have someone in your home who struggles with mental health. However, there's no way to enforce that without going around knocking on people's doors and doing random checks, which is just not gonna fly.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the many reasons why I was just using Switzerland as an example of
Sure.
common sense gun laws. I don't think that would stand up, especially with our Supreme Court now.
Yeah.
When it was eventually, challenged at the Supreme Court level, that wouldn't stand up, and the gun club, neither one of those would stand up. Requiring gun owners to have and severe penalties if found to not have done that, including having your gun taken by another person to be used for a violent crime. If you don't have a gun lock on your gun, I think would be very sensible, very easy to implement, and pretty easy to deter once enough people had severe enough punishment for having their lawfully purchased and owned gun taken by their child or
Sure.
by their nephew, or
Now,
some
sorry,
other
finish.
thing. Kyle Rittenhouse was, his gun was legally purchased, I think, by his uncle and then given to him. So there's no record of Kyle Rittenhouse having
It wasn't.
possessed.
I don't think it was given to him in the sense of it ownership transferred. I think he was like, "Here, take this with you while you're going. Like, borrow my gun."
That's, I mean, in the eyes of the law, there's no difference.
Sure.
If you, I think I heard a police officer say one time, if someone gives you something, get it in writing, or take a picture, document it in some way.
Now, the other thing that I think I wanted to take issue with was storing things in gun clubs or hunting clubs, storing your firearms there. I mean, I live outside of Indianapolis. I was at a meeting today where one of my coworkers talked about how years and years ago she came home from work and her door had been kicked in. Her house had been robbed, and I think there is a lot to be said for self-defense, and there's a lot of studies that are showing that good people with guns are preventing millions and millions of crimes from going further.
They
and
are
it's hard.
not. They are, when you compare it to the amount of those people who are actually inadvertently injuring other people, it pales in comparison. Most people are injured by their own gun being mishandled.
So at that point, and well, here's the thing: we're not talking about mishandling. We're talking about, in this specific instance, we're talking about the ratio of how many crimes are committed with guns versus how many crimes are stopped by guns, and the measuring how many crimes.
It's not even close.
Well, the thing is, it's hard to measure how many are stopped because how many of those are going to go unreported. I mean, if a crime was stopped, it may not make it all the way up the chain. The point, that's aside the point.
Hold on. If a crime is committed with a gun, that's much less likely to be reported than the ones that are stopped by a gun. The ones that are stopped by a gun are more likely, at least in my mind, to be the ones where the police are involved, because the person doing it is less likely to be, they're not trying to hide it from the population the way that people who are committing the crime might be. So you're going to have more bystanders. You're going to have more police response. And what we do know, and I don't have the facts and figures in front of me right now, but a good guy with a gun does not stop a bad guy with a gun. Even when it's a trained professional, as was the case in Uvalde, as was the case in Trump's rally, the good guys with the gun were because of the the heat of the moment, whatever you want to say, were not effective at preventing the crime or even responding to the incident once it had
Right.
already happened.
Well, and so the problem here is the syntax of the sentence. It's the difference between can and will. And obviously, a good guy with a gun can stop crimes. Doesn't mean that they will.
But they don't. It's not
Uh,
can or will, is
there,
can or do.
I mean, there was that shooting
They
that
have
happened
the
in
ability to, but time and time again, they don't.
there. But there was that shooting not too long ago at that church where guy walks in, starts opening fire before he gets more than a couple shots off. Other people who see him doing this have him taken out. He's stopped from doing it. He can't go any further.
Did they shoot him?
Yeah, they did.
They did? Okay.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, going back to Thurston High School, Kip Kinkle shot 9 people, murdered 2, and was not taken out by a gun, was taken out by somebody who had knowledge of how guns work, waited for him to reload, and then rushed him. And that's
Right.
also been more effective in the history of mass shootings. More perpetrators of these mass shootings are taken out by unarmed people than they are by guns.
So I think part of the disconnect we're having here is you're focusing mostly on mass shootings, and I'm talking about gun-related crimes in general, right? Which can include mass shootings, but can also include carjackings. It can include someone walking up to you at a gas station, and then you turning around with your gun instead, and they go, "Okay, never mind," and they go away.
Yes,
like a lot of these things aren't going to go reported.
I'm still going to come in on the side of guns don't make people safer. I just am more familiar with the cases of mass shootings, but I'm very confident in saying that in non-mass shootings, just like one-on-one, your run-of-the-mill gun crimes, guns make everyone less safe because it takes an incredible amount of training to be able to use one effectively to stop a crime. Or to respond to a crime. And we don't have a requirement for that for even our top law enforcement members. We certainly don't have that for just the general public.
So I would say I do agree that if you are going to be someone who owns a gun, you should be required to have training with it and keep up with that training.
Absolutely.
I think that's basic safety knowledge. I mean, you're required to recertify your driver's license every couple of years, so often. But
I'd even go to say that I think everyone should just receive some kind of training with firearms.
Yeah, I think that would be smart too.
You never know if you're going to be able to, if you're going to come up, into a situation where that's going to be useful, and you're going to be much safer if you have experience with them. Now, owning guns, that's different.
So I want to, just because I want to go back and talk about some of the implications of this assassination attempt, I like this discussion, but I kind of want to put a cap on it before we get too much out.
Yeah.
So let's...
Sorry.
What? No, not sorry. I think that was great.
We
that
still
was
have
fantastic.
a whole other topic to get into.
I know. Really quick, though, let's just talk about the implications of this, right? I don't even want to talk about the memes that I've seen of this. Okay, I do want to talk about one. I saw one meme where someone was like, "Here's how you keep the Secret Service out of your house," and it was one of those wheelchair ramps up to a door.
Yeah, sloped. Yeah.
Anyway, I think this is everything Trump needed to win. I think, granted, I think he won the election a year ago.
I think it helps. I think it helps him. I think it helps him. And
not just the fact that it was an attempt, but the fact that he got up afterwards and had that amazing photo you see where his hand's in the air, he's got blood streaming down his face, Secret Service is around him. Like I wrote about it on my Facebook and my Instagram, but that is a election-winning photo. That is a historic. Photo. It really is.
That's and not powerful just photo.
And not just the photo, but also the video footage where he stands up and goes, "Fight, fight, fight," and people start chanting "USA, USA." Like,
where he's
come on,
physically fighting his Secret Service agents.
Right, because he's hearing people say the shooter's down, so he's like, "You can let me go," and he's fighting to get up to be like, "The people need to see me. The people need to see that I'm okay."
Right.
Like,
if I'm in that position though, and my Secret Service are saying, "Hey, no, get your head down, you idiot." I'm going to listen to them.
You almost said something else. You almost said something.
I did. I can say it if you want.
No, it's okay.
So there's no ambiguity. No, I think it goes to show Trump's hubris Trump has never gotten out of that adolescent phase of thinking you're invincible. That is apparent in all of his speeches, in the way that he conducts himself in his personal life, in the way that he responded to this shooter. Trump is doesn't know the meaning of the word shame or humility.
On the contrary, I think it shows some amount of genius. And I hate saying that because I do not like Trump.
No.
Listen.
I'm not going to entertain it. The word genius being used in connection with Trump. I know that you don't actually believe that.
Here's
Trump
the thing.
is not a genius.
Look,
by any stretch of the imagination.
Genius does not have to be like a Stephen Hawking. I know everything. I can figure everything out.
It does have to be a basic level of competency, which
and I think when it comes to playing the political game, that Trump has way more competency than people give him credit for. You don't just become president of the United States being a politically incompetent person, right? If you don't,
I think you very much do. I think that's been the problem for the last 8 years.
Okay.
I think that's exactly what happened, Cameron.
No, I will disagree
I think it's
with
a
that.
population or a popularity contest. And Trump won a popularity contest because of name recognition.
Then how come he lost to freaking Mitt Romney, a no-name former governor of Massachusetts in 2012?
Because he wasn't pushing as hard.
He was totally pushing as hard.
Effort is I mean, there are other factors that go into it, but genius or political know-how or just common sense were never part of his playbook.
No, I'm going to stick with that word. I'm going to say that it was, at the very minimum, a stroke of genius, and here's why. Right? You don't have to agree.
It's
right?
not even a broken clock is right twice a day situation.
No, I think
he is a broken clock, and he was only right once.
No, I'm going to fight you on this and say I think this was a very purposeful, active choice that serves him very well. I think, and let me tell you, he knew going into this that he pretty much already had the election after that debate, right? And I think he had the election a year ago for a lot of reasons. But after that debate, he's like, yeah, I got this. And then on top of that, right, you got two ways to play off an assassination attempt. The, oh my gosh, something happened, I need to hide away. Or, no, I am a strong physical leader. If he's trying to argue that Joe Biden is a weak, ineffectual person, and then he just hunkers down when after the shooter has been loudly addressed as taken care of and no other threats are imminent, and he just lets them keep him hunkered down, that's not going to keep up with that image.
It's not a matter of hunkering down. It's a listening to your security officials who are telling you, stay the fuck down.
But
I think that's an
exact quote too of what they were saying. If you can hear it in the live TV. But for him to realize, okay, I'm safe now, or at least I think I'm safe. And regardless,
but what he thinks doesn't matter.
It does.
That's part of hubris, is not knowing when you're too dumb to be able to make a good decision.
No,
when I go on a water slide at a water park, I don't just go down the water slide whenever the fuck I think I should go. I wait for the lifeguard to tell me.
And he waited until he heard people say shooter is down. And then
people say, not meaning the people behind me in line.
Service. No, his Secret Service
did not
agents.
Wait until the Secret Service said it.
Maybe I'm getting the timeline mixed up.
He went against what because the Secret Service wouldn't continue to try to shield them if they're like, oh no, it's all cool.
Either way, he waits until fire is done for a good beat before he stands up. And I still think
he got lucky, and he should thank his lucky stars that he
and you know, maybe that's true. I will concede that he got lucky. I think he knew that standing up is going to be a risk, but I think he thought, I firmly believe that he made the active, conscious decision to say, the firing is done. It's probably safe. I'm going to stand up and show people that I am okay. I am strong, and I am what they want out of a leader. And that's exactly what he did. He stood up. Okay. He fought this. Let me finish this. He fights the Secret Service and says, no, I'm going to stand up. And you can hear him say stuff like that. He's saying, no, no, no. And and I'll agree, that's a stupid decision. Like, I'm not going to say that it's smart for him to, safety-wise, stand up. But visuals.
Well, first he had to find a shoe.
visuals wise, it's extremely smart for him to stand up and say, look at how strong I am. And then not only to do that, but to cheer on the people and then to have those photo ops. I think he played it as perfectly as you can play an assassination attempt. And it reminds me of the attempt on Teddy Roosevelt, right? Teddy Roosevelt is moving from one event to another, gets shot in the process, but it doesn't go all the way through him. It doesn't enter his lungs. It just barely embeds in his chest. And
Goes
then
on and continues to make his speech.
And not only that, he travels from point A to point B and gives his speech. And that's after he sees people taking the assailant away, calls him over and questions him, and then says, take him away, don't hurt him. He needs to stand trial. I mean, this is the modern day equivalent of that.
It's not. And we need to move on because we have another topic. But can I just ask you one question?
Sure, ask me the question.
What on God's green earth would it take for you to entertain the idea that Trump is just a blithering idiot who happened to be benefited by Secret Service who were marginally competent as individuals, not as an organization, and the fact that the photographers that were there knew how to position themselves and happened to get lucky. There was one photographer that got a picture of the bullet traveling behind him. That wasn't
crazy.
Skill. That was luck.
You're right.
Why are you willing to attribute luck to the photographers, but not dumb luck to Trump, who has shown us time and time again that he is not a political genius? Why is it only when it benefits his self-image that he's a political genius? When it doesn't benefit his self-image, it's a nefarious plot from other people to defame him.
So
what would it take for you to come onto my side and say Trump got lucky, and also he should have kept his head down?
So a few things
Listen to his security detail.
First of all, I did just say that he should have kept his head down. I did just say it's stupid of him to stand up and fight it.
But then you proceeded to say that it was a masterful plan of him being like, I'm going to use a show of force instead of just hubris and ego, stupidly defying the instructions that he was giving by the people more qualified to speak on the safety of the situation than he was.
Because I don't think it's a masterful plan in the sense of safety. I don't even think it's a plan. I think it's a choice, right? A plan means that you've got it figured out ahead of time. I think this is a choice he made in the moment. And I will say that when you've got Secret Service people saying, hey, you just got shot in the face, you need to stay down, the smart thing to do is to stay down. I said that once, I said it again. But
can we address the fact that he was way more concerned with his shoe than he was his ear?
That's shock. I mean, if you got shot at, you would be in some kind of mental shock too.
Still, I think it also speaks to like if you want to know where, I forget what movie this is from, but I think it was Sherlock. Have you ever seen Sherlock?
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's like their Scandal in Bohemia episode, and he lights a fire in the apartment to figure out where like the secret code is in Irene Adler's apartment. And because he knows that in times of crisis, people are going to look towards the thing that they care about most. Most people would look towards their children or look towards, where they've stashed money. Trump's first reaction in crisis was to look for his shoes.
I don't think that was his first reaction. That was the reaction after he's being told, let's move. Right. I mean,
I wouldn't have given a second thought to my shoes. I got shot in the ear.
Again, if you're being told stay down, and then after that you're being told, okay, the shooter's gone. Yeah, look for your shoe. I mean, but
he was. I think you need to review the video. He was very concerned with his shoes very early on.
But still, again, shock does a lot of crazy things to people. When you get shot at and tell me that you're thinking straight, right? You have a bullet rip through your ear and tell me that, I'm not going to say that your priorities are straight. I'm going to say that you are thinking in a 100% logical situation or logical form. I mean,
but also now imagine that I wasn't thinking about that.
Go ahead.
If I wasn't dealing with a full barrel, for pun intended, that would still be the same if I wasn't dealing with a fully loaded cannon to begin with.
So to push through this and answer the rest of your question, it would take a lot for me to admit that Trump is a blithering idiot on any subject at any point.
Okay. Clearly.
Because, well, and it's not just Trump, it's anybody, right? I don't think anybody's
Okay.
a blithering. I think very few people. There are some people. I think there are very few people who are blithering idiots or just idiots in general. I think I think, as we mentioned earlier, I have a big distrust of the media in general. Fox News, MSNBC, can't stand either of them, right? I try to get information from a wide range of people, but I also take everything with, I wouldn't say a grain of salt, I'd say like an entire block, and it has been my experience that the media, but in particular media on the left, does not treat Trump fairly. But I also think the media on the right treats him more as a savior or more as, I think the left is too hard on him. Yeah, I think the left is too hard on him. I think the right is not nearly hard enough. Sure. And one example of that would be the point where he said that there were fine people on both sides. The media cuts it right there. And he does say there are fine people on both sides. But if you watch the rest of the video, he specifically says, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, because those people should be condemned totally.
But Cameron, you're smart enough to read into subtext, right? Because you and I watched the same video. I've watched that video to its entirety.
What do you want him to say?
I want him to say it's so
that they should be condemned totally, because he did. I don't think that.
Yes.
Here, okay.
That
so here's the thing:
that the people marching with the torches, I wanted him to come out harder against people that were marching with torches, who were chanting anti-Semitic slogans, white nationalist slogans, and what he condemned was the way that I took it was him saying that the people on the left who are protesting against these people in their polo shirts and their tiki torches are just as bad as the guy who ran in to the crowd with his car. The guy who ran into the crowd with his car is especially bad, but also the guys with the torches and the polo shirts also shouldn't be doing what they're doing, because that's not what America is about.
So here's
it wasn't about good or bad. He made it a dichotomy unnecessarily, and that is what I think is my issue with him there.
I will say
he didn't condemn them, but he also didn't condemn them enough.
So at what point is it enough? Right? I mean, here's the thing. No, you can set that line anywhere, and no matter what he says, someone
and I don't think that's where he should have set the line.
But no matter where he sets the line, someone's going to have a problem with it. And so instead of setting a line and being super specific, just say totally, and then it's done. Here, I had a similar conversation like this earlier today on social media with one of my friends from college about this very thing, about how the left and the right condemn or don't condemn different things. And I have noticed, and I'm not going to say this is a scientific survey, I'm not going to say that I have data to support this, but it has been my personal qualitative experience that people on the left want things called out specifically. And you just said the same thing, right? You wanted him to call out exactly what they were doing and why it was bad.
I think that hiding behind the fact that everything is nuanced is a cop-out. And I see that within all parties.
Sure.
But specifically when it comes to white nationalists, neo-Nazis, I don't think that there needs to be nuance. I think we can just call a spade a spade. And I don't think you can think of any other example except for maybe David Crooks. As an example on the left.
Without getting,
a spade needs to be called a spade.
Let's not get bogged down in the weeds about this, because this is a topic on theory.
You just asked me to comment on the weeds.
I didn't ask you to. I said you already did. I said you just called for specifics, right?
Sure.
Which is something that a lot of people on the left do. They say, hey, I want you to, and a lot of leftist politicians fill in with this, and they
I want
call
things
out
to be
things
taken into
specifically.
context.
But
I don't want
if you want things to be
specifics. I
taken
want
into
them taken into
context, then why would you
context.
ignore that second half of Trump's statement where he said who should be condemned totally? But anyway,
Because the context extends beyond what he said in that moment, and more the nuances of his rhetoric.
I think
His
if you're going to
speech
say,
and rhetoric were different. His speech was totally defensible. It was, I'm just saying, let's all get along. His rhetoric was, there are fine people on both sides, and I'm not going to condemn neo-Nazis.
I think if you're going to
And
say,
I'm backed up by that in the fact that he's continued to do that and refused to condemn anyone involved in white supremacy, neo-Nazi things, as long as it's not just overwhelmingly apparent that that's what they're doing.
see, but if you're going to say we should just simply call a spade, but then talk about how there's all these different subtexts and contexts and things, why can't, if we want people to be taken for what they are on the surface, why can't we do that with him? Right? I think we
can
push.
He's a racist fascist.
Hold on. Okay,
That's what
definitely
I'm
not a
advocating
fascist.
for.
Definitely not a
He
fascist.
100% is.
As someone who studies a lot about fascism, he's not a
I
fascist.
don't think you understand what fascism is.
I don't think. Here's the thing. I think it. Oh man, we're talking about so many things at once. Give me a second. I'm gonna say a lot. I want to say a lot for a second. First of all, I think fascism is one of those words that has been overused to the point where it has very little meaning. And when you have words that have very little meaning anymore, you can start applying them to whatever you want. We've been using the term fascism since the 1940s when it began, and it had some connotations then that a lot of people still associate with it. And It's, as most political terms do, it has evolved. But just like a lot of things from the 1940s, we've begun to use it to compare to just about anything we don't like, which waters down the meaning of it. Now, that's just one thing.
Can I ask for something then in response to that?
Sure.
Even though you and I fundamentally disagree on what fascism is, can you at least agree that I, of all people, you have faith that I know the historical context and
yes.
I know the definition?
Oh, yeah. So,
okay.
I
still think he's a fascist. I also think that it's an overused term, but with all of that taken into context, I firmly believe he is by definition a fascist.
See, and I think the problem here is that there isn't one single definition of fascism, like most political terms.
Somebody who puts corporations in charge of the state and uses ethnic groups as scapegoats for national problems and emphasizes nationality and national pride in order to bolster its base, that's pretty textbook fascism.
Okay, but communism does a lot of those same exact things.
Yes, but in different ways. And if Trump were doing those same things in those ways, I would call him a communist.
And it's
but
not
he's
just...
not. He's doing them in the same ways that the fascists did it.
So the key thing about fascism is that it also needs to include a strict social hierarchy.
It does.
It sure does. And I don't see that with Trump, because, and here's why. I see with Trump just the same call that I see with any other Republican candidate of, I'm trying to appeal to the middle class to show you that you middle class and lower class can rise up and continue. It's this whole, which I'll admit is a myth, pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of thing.
Right.
And fascism does not call for that. Fascism says you are where you are supposed to be, and that's okay.
Right.
And that's
But
required.
It also victimizes another group and uses them as a scapegoat, which we are seeing in their newfound platform around migrant crime, which is a thing that's not being committed.
The other
There's
thing,
not a thing of migrant crime. It's not an actually tracked demographic, and also it doesn't exist. 91% of the people apprehended at the border smuggling drugs are American citizens, and I think almost 99% of the people who are caught crossing the border illegally do not have drugs on them. So this whole thing about migrant crime and their whole platform about immigration is specifically othering and using migrants as a scapegoat in order to create those class striations.
So, I what I'm thinking here is you're looking at some specific policies that I will agree with you on. I don't think that they are right about it, but just because they're not right doesn't mean that they are fascism, right? So,
No,
and,
that's
and
their party platform. It's not
again,
specific policies. This is their party platform. This is what they've been talking about for
okay,
weeks.
when I look at fascism throughout history,
Okay.
what I see is a creation of a police enforcement of some kind
Okay.
that strictly
ICE.
shuts down. No, no, that strict, because you don't know what I'm about to say. ICE does not
Okay.
apply to that. That strictly shuts down political opposition, right? You think Hitler's Sonderkommando and then later SS. You think of just the regained militarized police force that Mussolini came up with,
Sure.
and you see a physical, militaristic shutdown of opposition, which has not happened and is not
Has not.
happening
But
and has not been called for by.
that part is patently false. Trump has said on day one that he would not be a dictator except for day one, and that he would prosecute political opponents. He's
So
also said he's advocated for the removal of citizenship for anyone who is a naturalized citizen, meaning people who are born in the U.S. to parents who are not U.S. citizens, and that he would enact the largest deportation effort in the history of America. If that's not exactly what you just described, I don't know what would be, except for him saying, let's get all the Jews out of the country.
so here's why.
They're not
Here
stupid, but they're
here's
also
why.
not doing what you just said.
Here's why. I'll tell you. Most fascist governments do it with a militarized system, whereas Trump was saying, "I'm going to utilize the current legal system to do it." And
Okay,
hold
what
on, let me finish. And
what
stop.
form do you think that would take?
Okay.
What form do you think he's gonna have senators go door to door and be like, "Hey, I heard your parents were born here, and so unfortunately, I'm gonna need you to leave.
So another thing.
Sorry.
Here's the thing.
Do you think that's
Okay,
what he's gonna do?
No. Okay, listen. You keep asking me these questions, and then you interrupt me before I can give you a
I know. I'm
complete
sorry.
answer.
I'm very worked up.
So am I, because here's the thing. Fascism has a tendency towards a single person having all of the power. And the way our government is set up, in order for that to happen, we would have to change a lot of how things work. And it just isn't happening. And it's not currently capable. Because a fascist is a single leader, a single person who has all the power. And we don't, I mean, even with Trump in power, let's say he even has a lot of sway in Congress, he just doesn't have that amount of control. And he can't, because of how the Constitution is set up. He can't pass laws. He can make executive orders, but so can Biden. And Biden has done a comparable number of executive orders that Trump has. I mean, FDR.
But scale.
Even then, Trump, a lot of these things that you're blaming Trump on are things that people like the Obama administration began and he continued, right?
Not to the same degree. That's why I'm talking about scale. A lot of it
often to the same degree, and a lot of it he even toned down.
Scale and context. The packing of the Supreme Court is one of them. And it's not just Trump. I mean, I am using Trump as an amalgam for the larger party in general, but because the party has rallied so much around Trump and it's become such a cult, Trump is the figurehead of this party. Now, packing the Supreme Court, there are two justices there's one justice that shouldn't have ever been appointed. And then by using the same rules and loopholes to get that justice appointed, there's another justice that shouldn't have been appointed. And then there's one that was just wholly unqualified and a rapist who should
Again,
never have been appointed.
these are your personal
But he
opinions,
passed
and
it.
these are things that were not proven to be true in the court
There
setting.
is no precedent
cannot...
for Neil Gorsuch to have ever been for Obama's appointment of Merrick Garland to have been denied, and for Neil Gorsuch to have been a Supreme Court justice. Now, if we're playing by those same rules, Amy Coney Barrett should never have been appointed because it was even later and with less notice, and she had less experience than Neil Gorsuch.
I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not shady, right? Because I agree. I think that should have been handled the correct way that there is precedent for. I'm not going to sit here and say that rushing Supreme Court nominations was bad, but I am going to sit here and tell you that if given the opportunity, Biden would have done the exact same thing.
I don't agree with that.
Oh, I 100% think he would.
But fortunately, because it's never happened, I get to take the moral high ground and say I don't think that would happen because you have no evidence to show that it would happen.
So speaking of moral high ground, speaking of Biden,
this is gonna if we go down this rabbit hole of talking about our second topic, we will be here all night. Do you want to do a two-parter?
Sure. Let's mark.
I think that there's, and let me apologize. I know I dominated the conversation today. I apologize.
I appreciate the apology. I will say it's a little hard when you ask me a big question, but only let me give tiny answers.
I know. It's because I expect you to interrupt me, and I don't realize that people don't do that politely in polite conversation. So and I'm just an asshole.
Let me say one thing here. I don't think Trump is a fascist because there is a big difference between his rhetoric and his policy. When you look at the way he talks, when you look at the Trump on the campaign trail and the Trump in interviews and the Trump on social media versus the actual things that Trump has passed and Trump did policy-wise, it's a vastly different Trump, right?
I agree with that, but not for the reason that you might think.
Well, and the reason I think it is because every politician is like that. Every politician has to, in the campaign trail, appeal to the grassroots people, the more extreme people who are going to actually show up to the rallies, show up in the primary elections, and drum up a lot of that support. Every presidential candidate on each side has to do that. And then
Biden
when they are president,
do that, and that was a real detriment to Biden. Biden wasn't left enough to be able to garner support from the left. That was his problem.
I will say that is to some extent true. I think that's a bigger issue that I don't want to get into right now, though.
I don't think Trump made that same mistake. I think he garnered a lot of support from the far right. It was the people that were more centered that he had a problem gaining.
Well, and again, that's because what Trump talks about appeals more towards the more extremer people in the party, but what Trump actually does in practice,
his speeches,
right? Yeah,
okay,
at his rallies and his speeches on Twitter, like those kind of things. But when you look at
trends more towards the
more towards the far right, more towards the far right. And I don't want to say far right in the sense of and I don't want to say far right in the sense of the extremists. I mean the far right in the
people
sense
further on the spectrum.
Right. The more solid conservative, the more stereotypical Republicans. But when you look at his policies, especially when you compare them to what the standard Republican platforms are, a lot of what Trump has done is much more moderate than you would think, right? He is not in favor of an all-out abortion ban. He has banned bump stocks and has called for gun control. He is totally fine with gay marriage. And these are all things that any Republican
just came back.
Yeah, but under whose administration?
Under Biden's, but
because of Trump appointed judges.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I don't know.
I totally agree though. But this is why I think that Trump really is the blithering idiot and the far right extremist that I claim he is, but that he doesn't seem, is because Trump has now. I don't want to give credit where credit is not due.
Sure.
So I'm not going to call the people that he's appointed to his staff intelligent, but I will say that they're more intelligent than Trump. And so I think that's why you have a difference in who Trump presents himself to be on stage versus what he does actually in office and the policies that he enacts. Because I think he has people much, much, much smarter than he is making the actual decisions.
But
And the person that we see on stage is unfortunately very, very much who he is behind closed doors. And thankfully we have a couple people with some sense reining it in every now and then.
see, I agree with a lot of that, but I take issue with the idea that the same person we see on stage is the same person behind closed doors. I don't think that's true. He's always had to be a media persona. Basically his entire life he's been a media persona.
Saying that he doesn't get it.
But you also have his own staff members saying that he actually gets along with a lot of the Democrats in Congress, who then turn around and say these terrible things about him.
Doesn't understand the issues.
Sure,
those are different things.
But
you can be super friendly, but still be completely ignorant of anything of substance.
Sure, but the best leaders, and I'm not going to sit here and say Trump is the best leader, but in generally speaking, the best leaders are people who surround themselves with people who are much better matter experts than they are on a lot of things.
That bar is a lot lower with Trump. So it's really draw a name out of a hat and you'll get somebody more capable than he is.
Whether it is or not is irrelevant, because if he's choosing someone that he thinks is knowledgeable,
not choosing it. He's not choosing it.
Well, his cabinet, yeah, he is.
No. I think that he has people. So he inherited this like big real estate empire from his father, Frederick Trump. He did a very bad job, at least according to his niece, Mary L. Trump, who is a doctor of psychology. He didn't do any work to earn that. And those people followed him into his presidency. And those are the people who were initially making decisions about who should you appoint, who should you listen to about, advice on who to appoint. Trump has not made any decisions himself.
See, I think that's not giving him enough credit. I will say that he's probably taking advice.
That's why you had Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education. She was a top pick by the people that are now running Project 2025.
Yes, because the current Secretary of Education is so much better.
If they don't think that children should be homeschooled and understand that the earth is more than 6,000 years old, then yeah, they're doing a bit better than Betsy DeVos.
So I'm going to take issue with that as someone who was homeschooled. Okay.
But I know that you know that the earth is more than 6,000 years old.
Right, but I also know that the quality of my homeschool was far superior to the level of education I got in public school until about my sophomore year.
Okay. I mean,
and that's not so much
that
because
may be the exception to the rule, though, and not every child should be. We shouldn't make all schools worse just because all schools aren't as good as Thurston may have been.
As a public school teacher, right?
You're not a public school teacher. You're a charter school teacher.
I'm a public charter school. Charter schools are run by the district in which they lie, but they have less requirements.
Do you have to pay to go there?
You do not. They're free.
Oh, okay.
Funding is provided by a mixture of donors, federal and state level grants, private grants, and the school district in which the school sits. Yeah, we may not have gotten around to talking about Biden, but we talked about charter schools for 8 minutes, which I'm cutting out. You're welcome. Just to tie it back, right? To bring everything to go back to the original.
Yeah. Bring it back home for me.
There is absolutely no segue that's going to allow me to connect misbehaviors at an inner city charter school to this. What I will say is I do want to end on one thing where I want to say, which I have said that phrase, I think 5 times in the last 15 seconds.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, it's not it's not because you interrupted me. I think I was just talking in circles for a minute there.
Yeah.
I thoroughly believe that Trump is nowhere near as bad as people think he is. And I don't think he's a fascist, because when I look at the policies that he has enacted and the policies that he actually pushed for and followed through on, do not fit a fascist regime. I will say his rhetoric...
Are you taking into account the things that he is saying that he wants to do in his second term?
Okay, but again,
That also is much different.
saying and doing are two completely different things. How many things did Obama say he was going to do that he actually did first or second term? How many things
Right.
did Biden say he was going to do first, and even though it didn't happen yet,
But
second term?
you do get what I'm asking.
I
Knowing that no one is going to be able to achieve all of that, you do get what I'm
I
asking
get what
about.
I do.
Are you listening to what he is saying he wants to do, and is that in any way concerning to you?
No, and I'll tell you why.
Because you don't think
Because
he's going to be able to do it, or because you don't think it's
partially,
concerning?
mostly the first one, partially the second one, and I will tell you why.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to be able to do it because even if he has a supermajority in the House and the Senate, how many people are actually going to be on board with a lot of these policies? You know, a lot of the congressmen in the Republican Party who are sitting or running are not people who are super Trumpers. And in fact, we're seeing that a lot of Congress people who get Trump's endorsement are losing their elections. And so a lot
Yeah.
of Congress people are, trying to play up, as they should, their own independent game. And what that
Some
means long
people are people
term.
that his constituents actively tried to murder.
Mm, yeah. um, I wouldn't
I
say
mean, just
actively.
say
Again, that is a
they
gross
came in.
exaggeration of what
They
January
came
6th
in.
was.
They came in with ski masks, body armor, all of the accoutrements
I
to
don't
somebody
want to
trying to
get into
murder
January
somebody.
6th. I don't want to get
Just
into
saying.
January 6th right
Just
now.
saying.
What I'm saying
I
here.
don't go shopping for Christmas presents in body armor and a baklava.
I
Or
do.
balaclava.
Baklava.
Baklava.
I would love
You
to
know
dress
what?
in a
No,
baklava.
I
It's so
stand by that.
sticky.
I also don't wear baklava when I go shopping for presents, and I
um,
think that that's despicable.
but the reason I don't think it's concerning is because I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that
Because
he
he's
has.
inept.
No, because I don't think enough people in Congress are on board with it. If everyone looks at the president
He's the
campaign.
first one. He's the first one to elect or to appoint
Hold
somebody
on.
to the Supreme Court the way that Neil Gorsuch was, and he's the first president to have any kind of violent uprising in the Capitol.
But you have
So
to
I
remember,
think unprecedented doesn't mean that he's not going to be able to.
sure, right, everything is unprecedented until it happens.
Yeah, and I
But
think we're going to see a lot more of those incidences.
I mean, we're millennials. Our whole lives have been unprecedented times. What I'm saying though is
That's fair.
in order to accomplish let me backtrack. Actually, people look at the presidential campaigns and say, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and then it doesn't happen for two reasons. One, because if they make it happen, then they can't run on that platform again for a second term, and
Well,
two,
Trump
because
can't. Either way.
but no, any president, right? If they say, hey, I'm going to lower taxes, it doesn't benefit them to lower taxes their first term, because then they can't say, I'm going to lower taxes again, right? Which is why Obama didn't pass Obamacare until his second term. That's why you have any president has a much better second term than their first term, because they're not worried about re-election anymore. The second reason is because in order to get anything done, the president has to convince a majority of 435 people to agree on it. And
I think that Trump showed us that that's not necessarily true.
Oh, George Washington showed us that that's not necessarily true when he signed the first executive order, right? Executive orders exist to do that, but they are not laws. They are temporary measures that are not intended to be taken as laws. And
potato.
Potato. FDR used them to intern people based on race, right? If you want to talk about fascism, let's look at the guy who literally said anybody with slanty eyes and dark skin goes to a camp.
Okay, you're right. This was a can of worms that we need to. I want to table this.
Sure. But the other reason I don't think it's concerning is not just because I don't think it will happen, but it's also because when I look at the percentage, statistically speaking, of everything presidents say they're going to do and then what they actually do, it's rarely the extreme stuff that gets passed or that they even really attempt. And so
that's what I'm worried about with this one, is that I think that he will get much closer to those extreme stuff. And to be fair, the extreme stuff that either he or people who are claiming to be I'm going to not beat around the bush. People that are in charge of Project 2025, which Trump can't deny that he has any knowledge of. All he wants, I don't I don't buy that he's not involved in that or not willing to, you know, benefit from their thing. Their platform scares me, and they're
My
much
issue
more better organized than the past, and I'm concerned about them.
my issue with Project 2025 is that it's so vague. I've looked at their website. I've tried to look into what exactly they stand for, and they don't have any specifics, which is
What they
scary for two
stand for
reasons.
is they don't have policy, like actual policies that they stand for. What they stand for is ideological, which is inherently vague, and that's the stuff that concerns
Yeah,
me.
but there's similar progressive and leftist movements and
No.
policies. And no, I don't mean that right now. I mean like with Woodrow Wilson. I mean with FDR. I mean with there totally
Sure.
were, and those didn't happen either. And those got really close. I mean, a lot of those went to Congress and only barely failed. So like,
Yeah, but this is a new era, and I mean, I
no,
agree. I agree that their Project 2025 in theory is not a novel organization.
sure,
It is novel within the scope and the amount of technology and resources at their disposal.
I
And
yeah,
I find them very dangerous.
I having looked at what their rhetoric is, having looked at other similar organizations, I would not be concerned because there are tons of these things that pop up all the time. And sometimes they are used as fear tactics by one side or the other, and very rarely do they go anywhere.
I think
I
that
always caution people, and again, because I have a big distrust of the media. Anytime someone is telling you something in the media, I don't just want you to pay attention to what they're saying. I want you to pay attention to how it makes you feel and ask yourself, do I feel this way because they want me to, or do I feel this way because this is how the facts actually make me feel? Right?
yeah, which would mean that no one would ever listen or watch Fox News ever again.
Or MSNBC, right? But the point I'm trying to make here with this particular issue is Project 2025. I don't see anybody on the right talking about it, taking it seriously.
I do.
Every single person, and maybe we just have different groups that we're looking at, but every single person I've seen who has brought up Project 2025 has either been Donald Trump saying I'm not paying attention to it, or everybody else has been a leftist saying you should be concerned about Project 2025. And I'm not saying ignore it.
I think there's an intentional smokescreen. It would, if I were doing something that I know would be highly unpopular, but that I felt very strongly and existentially would need to be passed, I would try to downplay it until it became and quietly work behind the scenes to, you know, like almost like a cabal.
Yeah, but
But
here's the thing.
there's much more
Any
evidence for that happening with Project 2025 than there is anything like the Bilderberg Group or, you know,
No,
Bohemian Grove or
I'm
something
gonna
like
push
that.
back on that and say, like the Watergate thing had very few amounts of staff, right? And they couldn't keep that under wraps, and that was nowhere near as big as
That's
the
incompetence.
allegation that there is some kind of smokescreen or people pulling the strings, right? Because if we're going to say that there are people pulling the strings or there's a smokescreen happening and there's real powerful people behind it pulling, making moves, we got to say the same thing about the Democratic Party with Biden being so old and with Kamala Harris, who received a total of 844 votes in her last election, now being the
Right.
nominee, right?
Yeah.
So I would push back on both of those and say I don't think that there's some big thing here that we need to be worried about. I think it's just people getting together saying here's what we would like to see out of a Republican campaign. I think it's
With
the
a
Heritage
massive amount
Foundation.
of money that are able to contribute to a campaign and able to influence policy decisions
But
unfettered.
just like we said with the people, like the good guys with guns, just because they can doesn't mean they will. And just because they
I
do,
don't know that that's I
and,
don't
and just
accept that
and
as
just
an
because they
equivalency.
do doesn't mean it will
That's a
go
false
anywhere.
equivalency. That's a
I'm
false
not saying they're
equivalency.
equivalent. I'm saying we're pulling the same logic in here, right?
I'm
I'm not.
saying that's a false equivalency of logic.
I don't. I don't think so. I can see
We can
why.
revisit this. I really have to pee.
And we gotta go. Thank you for listening to Agreeable Disagreements.
Yes, and we especially want to thank oh God, what's their name? Halcyon Club,
Oh my gosh.
for
They're
letting
your
us
friends.
use. I know. I'm sorry, Andre. We want to thank Halcyon Club for letting us use their song "This Life Is Tough But Fair" from their EP Headset Emotions. Like I said, they are working on new music. They're a great band. Check them out. And Cameron, what was it? Your turn or my turn?
I think it was your turn for the fun fact. We talked for like 10 minutes about whose turn it was. It's your turn.
Do we want to do that one?
Do that one. I think it's great.
Okay. I mean, I feel like I don't have a lot of information about it. But the word science and the word shit have similar origins in the Proto-Indo-European language word. I think it was shiad, meaning to like take apart or break down. So when someone tells you that you're full of shit, you're really full of science.
Also, it means that global warming is bullcrap.
Well, I mean, cattle farms do contribute a lot to global greenhouse emissions through methane. Methane is like the worst
fixers. But grazing also fixes more carbon. We're not going to talk about
this. They absolutely don't make up for the amount of